Hi everyone, I'm Jo.
I'm Lisa, and we're here from BookBub, and today we're going to be discussing some of our recommendations for historical fiction for book clubs. So there's a lot of great books that have come out in 2018 and are coming out in 2018 that are historical, and they cover different time periods, and we think that they are really, really strong picks for a book club.
Yes, we have a lot of different time periods today.
We do.
We have American Revolution.
Yep. World War
II.
World
War II, yeah.
Tudors. Yeah, there's a lot here. So if your book club likes historical fiction or reads that sort of move through time periods, this list is for you.
Yes, and we'd also love to hear what your book club is currently reading, and if you comment, you'll be eligible to receive one of our book club stickers, which we've enjoyed giving away.
Yeah, they're so cute, and everyone in the office has them on their laptop, so you could do the same.
Yeah, so comment with what your book club's currently reading for a chance to win them.
Great, so we'll go ahead and get started.
Yes, we will get started.
Okay, great. So the first one I want to recommend is My Dear Hamilton by Stephanie Dray and Laura Camoy. So this is a brand new book that just came out last month, I believe. Yep. So fresh off the presses. And this is the second novel from these two authors. And the first novel that they collaborated on was called America's First Daughter.
Yes.
And so My Dear Hamilton is also set in the Revolutionary period, but it follows Eliza Schuyler Hamilton. She's the wife of Alexander Hamilton, one of the founding fathers, who's like really popular right now with the musical Hamilton. So this is just a really interesting perspective that we get to see the founding of America and everything that happened with Alexander Hamilton from his wife's perspective.
Right.
So it starts when Eliza is courting, her and Alexander are courting. So they're just dating, they haven't married yet. Then it goes through their marriage, and some of you might know Hamilton had a pretty public affair. So we see Eliza's perspective on that and what that was like on her end. And then it also follows Eliza after Hamilton's death. He died in a duel. Spoiler, sorry.
I think you can spoil that one.
I think I can spoil it. It's been a few hundred years. And we see his new life adjusting as a widow. So it's fascinating. It's a great perspective on women during the Revolutionary War. But what I absolutely love about it is how well researched it is.
Yes.
They did so much research. They looked at documents, memoirs, diaries, letters from this time period to piece together who Eliza was. Right. And it's just a really fresh perspective on sort of a story that a lot of Americans are very familiar with. Like we know the story of the founding of America, so this just gives us a nice women's perspective. So again, this is My Dear Hamilton, and I think it's a great choice for book clubs.
Right. I think the fact that it continues beyond Hamilton's death is really, it's like a simple change, but it does make the story totally different.
Right, and it seems like the natural conclusion to the book, so I like that it actually goes beyond that because Eliza was still living.
Yes, it's also a beautiful cover.
So pretty.
Great. Okay, so the next one that I'm recommending, which I have talked about in the past, is The Home for Unwanted Girls by Joanna Goodman. This is one that I'm excited about for fans of Orphan Train specifically. It's about a child story, which is a little bit heartbreaking. It's also about this really interesting time period in Canadian history. Mm-hmm. So basically it's set in 1950s Quebec when there's this sort of tension between the French and English-speaking cultures. And it focuses on Maggie, who is English-speaking, and she falls in love with a French farm boy next door, which her parents really, really don't want for her. And then she becomes unexpectedly pregnant, and her parents sort of force her to give up this baby whose name is Elodie. So it's a sort of heartbreaking start where we see the separation between the two. And then we follow their alternating stories, and we see Elodie as an orphan, and she goes through this horrific experience where the orphanages were turned into mental institutions because a law had passed that gave mental institutions more funding.
Wow.
So she's in this really horrible situation, basically, and is treated improperly and is sort of abused, and she's just dying to get out of the system, and we get to see her sort of survive it. It's a survival story for Elodie. And at the same time, we follow Maggie, who finds love as an adult and is sort of like ready to start a new phase of her life with a new husband. But at the same time, as you'd imagine, that might sort of pull back memories of her past, and she's sort of dealing with that. So we get to follow these two alternating stories as we see each of them sort of adjust to this terrible thing that happened. I think it's a good choice for book club because it's a little bit heartbreaking. It's sort of this dark time period. Yeah. And it's nice to be able to talk to a group about that, I think. It's
I
like,
agree.
can read it alone, get a little teary-eyed, and then chat with other people about how they reacted to it. It's also just this interesting time period in Canadian history that is, I mean, I didn't know about it. I don't know if it's little known. I would think it might be. And again, I just really like these parallel storylines. So if you like Orphan Train, this is a really nice choice.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. I'm so excited to read it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So I'm seeing some comments about this one already, and for her other book as well. So this is Kristen Hanna's The Great Alone. And you might know Kristen Hanna. She's written a ton of books, but the huge blockbuster book she wrote in 2015 was The Nightingale.
Yes.
So this is her first novel after The Nightingale. And it is not set in World War II, which I actually think is great because you can't draw a lot of comparisons to the two.
It's really hard to follow.
Yeah, they sort of stand on their own. So this book takes place in 1970s Alaska. So there's this man named Ernst who was in the Vietnam War. I believe he was a POW. And he comes back from the war, and he's really suffering PTSD. Okay. And so he inherits some land in Alaska, and he decides to move his family up there. And his wife and his young daughter are actually really excited about this move. They think it's going to be a good change for their family. They think it's really going to bring them closer together. Alaska is so beautiful, both in the winter and the summer, so they're really excited for this new landscape. They're going to live off the land. And what they don't really realize is that when they get there, Alaska is super rural at this time in the 1970s. There's almost nothing. There's no electricity, no running water. You're sort of forced to live off the land. So they arrive in summer when everything is great. You have like all these hours of daylight. And then winter comes, and it's only light for a few hours a day. So they're in darkness all the time. And Ernst's PTSD really takes over. Okay. So he is just sort of in this state of mental decline, and it really affects his wife and his young daughter. So it follows the family over a course of a few years, and we learn how his wife Cora and his daughter Lenny are dealing with his family members' like really unstable mental state, and how they're dealing with the Alaskan wilderness. I absolutely love this book. I flew through it. I flew through it, and it's not a short book. I actually liked it better than The Nightingale, which I know I'm going to get some criticism for. But what I liked about it is that I thought it was so unique. I don't read a lot of books set in the 1970s or set in Alaska, which I found just so fascinating. Yes. Whereas, World War II historical fiction is pretty popular. Yes. And you're going to love this story if you like The Nightingale because it follows the family through several years, similar to The Nightingale. So you get to see them at different ages and sort of how they're coping with this move to Alaska. So this is a great one for book club. I actually read it on my own, but then I made my mom read it after so we could discuss. You
created your own book club around it.
Exactly. We created a mini book club because it's one you're going to want to discuss. The jacket or like any of the publisher's descriptions don't really tell you about like the main thing that's happening. So I was really surprised when I got to sort of the main plot point. Okay. And it's just really heartbreaking. And like you said, it's always good to discuss heartbreaking books with others. So if you haven't yet read Kristen Hanna's new book, definitely pick it up for the summer on the beach and then find some friends to talk about it with.
I'm seeing Diane saying, love The Great Alone, love all her books. Tons of comments on this one, of course.
Yeah, she's amazing. You can't go wrong with this one. And I feel like it's so buzzy. So even if you don't have a book club, you could absolutely find someone who's read it in your social circle.
For sure, yeah. If you haven't read it yet, add this to your to-read list.
Definitely.
Awesome. Okay, so the next one that I have is World War II.
Nice.
And this is The Atomic City Girls by Janet Beard. So this one's really good for fans of Lilac Girls because it's a women's story. And for fans of Hidden Figures, based sort of on the plot and the time period, which you'll hear more about. Right. But it basically takes this really sort of secretive time period in history, which was the creation of the Manhattan Project, and tells it through the lens of this woman who works there, who's June, who's 18 years old. So it's just a sort of interesting perspective on this, again, somewhat little-known aspect of history. So June is 18, and she grew up around this the town is called Oak Ridge, Tennessee, that they sort of created for the Manhattan Project. And she grew up around there, and she decides that she's going to get a job there. But as someone who works in the factory, she doesn't totally know what they're doing there.
Right.
So you see that she's sort of interested in learning more, but she's not really privy to this information. until she starts having a relationship with Sam, the physicist who runs the laboratory.
Got it.
So we begin to learn more about his backstory and sort of why he works there as well. And what's really interesting about this one is that we then get alternating chapters between 4 different perspectives. So June, there's Sam. We also learn about June's roommate, who is sort of looking for a wealthy husband. And then we get the perspective of an African-American construction worker who gets involved in this sort of security breach. So there's a lot of different perspectives here, but June is sort of the main character that we follow. And then after the bombing of Hiroshima, June sort of has to reevaluate what exactly she was doing here, her sense of loyalty, her sense of country, and we sort of see that moral crisis play out a bit. So it's just a really human perspective on a very interesting time period, I think, and a time period that I haven't read a lot of books about, particularly the Manhattan Project.
Right.
So this is one that I think is really interesting.
I'm so excited about this one because I love that it's a home front World War II story.
Yeah,
we often
that's
see
true.
World War II stories set in Europe, and I love that it's something that's happening in the U.S., so that's really fascinating.
That's a good point. And this one's been out for, I think, a month or 2 now.
So pick it up.
This one up.
Okay, great. Good rec. So switching time periods once again, I wanted to recommend The English Wife by Lauren Willig. So it's a really, really nice cover. Yeah. So this one just came out in January, so it's been out for a few months, and it takes place in the late 1800s in the Gilded Age, which is a really cool time period. So it follows this couple named Annabelle and Bayard, and they're this really privileged New York couple who seem to have it all. But one day Bayard is found dead and Annabelle has gone missing. And so people presume that Annabelle has drowned and potentially had something to do with Bayard's murder. So there's a lot of questions surrounding the circumstances here. But Bay's sister actually partners with a reporter, and they together dig into the truth of what happened to Bayard and Annabelle. And this is the best part, is they just uncover so many deep family secrets along the way. And so basically this couple was not who you thought that they were, and there was a lot going on in their families that led to this moment of her disappearance and his death. It's extremely page-turning in that there's a ton of drama and there's a ton of suspense. And why I want to recommend this for book clubs is because it's got a lot of elements of mystery, which I think is great if you have a book club who maybe can't decide on what genre to read, or sort of going back and forth between, 2 books or you have differing opinions. I think this is a really great one. So it's a fun mystery, and it's set in the Gilded Age. What gets better than that? So this is The English Wife by Lauren Willig.
I'm seeing a lot of people commenting on this one too. Elizabeth said that she recently read it and loved it. Gorgeous cover and storyline.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm so glad you guys have heard of this one. This is a really, really awesome new release.
Nice. That's a good rec. That one's a little bit different too.
Yeah, I like that it's set in a different time period.
Nice. Okay. So the next one that I have is one that I'm really excited about, which is The Summer I Met Jack by Michelle Gable. So this one's about JFK, and as I've said before, I'm sort of intrigued by the Kennedys.
Me too. We live in Massachusetts, so it's you kind of have to be if you live here.
You recently went to the Kennedy Museum.
Yeah, I did.
So we've been talking about it. So this one comes out May 29th, and I think that this one makes the perfect historical fiction choice for a beach read too. So if your book club is looking for something that's sort of, I don't know, seasonally appropriate, something you want to read on vacation or just sort of want to escape to, I think this is a nice choice. This is the author of The Paris Apartment, which some people might have read or know. This author's, you did. Right? This author's really good at creating these really lush historical settings, I think. And she does that in this one as well. So basically imagines the relationship between JFK and Alicia Corning Clark, which in real life, I guess there's theories about how the Kennedy family paid Alicia off for an affair, and then some people speculate a love child.
Really?
Yes. So I was just so fascinated by sort of, how much of this is fact, how much of this is just reimagining it. I think, a book is a good historical fiction book when it sort of compels you to look up the facts after, or get as much information as possible. So basically it starts in the 1950s when Alicia arrives in Hyannisport, Massachusetts, and she's a maid to the Kennedys. And her and Jack get engaged, and then his father forbids it, and we sort of see them break up, and it's sort of it's obviously colored by class as well. So then Alicia goes to Hollywood and to Rome, and she dates Kirk Douglas, and she has a sort of fabulous career, which is just fascinating to follow her through that time period. And apparently a lot of that's true as well. And then it sort of comes full circle when we re-meet the two of them together at the eve of the inauguration for JFK.
Oh, interesting.
And they sort of have to reevaluate what their relationship is towards each other. So this one is just really juicy, entertaining historical fiction, I think. And again, if you're all interested in the Kennedys or this time period, I think it's a really fun choice and a really, really good beach read.
Yeah, I love that it's set in the summer and it's about a relationship. I mean, that's a perfect beach read in my opinion.
Yeah, and the New England.
I know.
In us.
I can't resist that book that's set in the Boston
We're in Boston,
area.
So.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Good rec. Okay, throwing it back very far in time. The next one I have to recommend is Alison Weir's new book called Jane Seymour, the Haunted Queen.
Nice.
So really, really pretty cover there. I want you to get a good glimpse of that. So you guys might know Alison Weir. She's a huge historical fiction history author. She's known for her well-researched books. She totally dives into who these characters were and really gets at the core of them. So this one is her third novel in the Six Tudor Queens series. And it comes out, I believe, next week or 2 weeks from now.
Nice.
May 15th. And so the first two books followed Henry VIII's first two wives. So they covered Catherine and Anne Boleyn, and now we're on to Jane Seymour. And so the story starts when Jane is actually a lady in waiting for Queen Catherine of Aragon, who's married to Henry. And Jane really wants to be a nun, but actually her family is in the nobility class, and they really want to be part of the royal court. They want to be in King Henry's favor, so they really urge her to get politically involved. As the story goes, Henry is not happy with Catherine. He moves on to Anne Boleyn, and Anne can't give him a son. So right after that, Henry turns his attention to Jane, and Jane is not necessarily the happiest about this, but her family really urges her to get in his favor. So that's where the story unfolds.
I really feel bad for Jane when
I feel so bad for her because all she wanted to do was be a nun, and her family got her involved in this major historical drama that we're still talking about centuries later. So if you love Tudor England, if you love Hilary Mantel or Philippa Gregory, this book is just a really great choice. I feel like if you like the Tudors, you can't read enough about them because there's always a new perspective, a new take on an old theory. So this is Jane Seymour, the Haunted Queen. It's a pretty thick book, which I think makes it a good book club discussion because there's a lot to talk about here.
Okay.
And there's sort of just a lot to unpack that you'll want to talk to a book club about.
Like we've said, this is one where it's just sort of amazing that this is factual.
I know.
It's like a soap opera.
Seems fake.
Yeah.
It's like Game of Thrones, but in real life.
Awesome. That's a good rec.
Thanks.
Okay, the next one that I have I'm really excited about is The Summer Wives by Beatrice Williams, which check out this gorgeous cover.
So pretty.
So this one is a July release. So we have a little bit of time here, but this is sort of one to look forward to. So Beatrice Williams, New York Times bestselling author. You might have read her stuff in the past.
Yeah.
This one is post-World War II, and it's really a story of love, of class, of power. This one's a really fun read. So it's set on an island off the coast of New England, which I get sort of a Martha's Vineyard vibe, but I believe it's a fictional island. So it's on this island, there's this dynamic where there's a mix of really wealthy families who sort of have summer houses there.
Okay.
And then there's working class families who live there all year round, particularly Portuguese fishermen. So we go through these two time periods, the 1950s and then 1969. And in 1950, we meet Miranda, who's 18 at the time, and her father just passed away in World War II. She's sort of reeling from his death. But her mother is marrying someone who is very wealthy and owns a house on this island.
Okay.
So Miranda's sort of an outsider here, and she just learns about the island through her very sophisticated stepsister, Isabel. And she also meets Joseph Vargas, who's the son of a lobster boater and goes to Brown, and we sort of learn more about his life as well and this interesting friendship. Then we're also going into 1969, and we see 18 years later, or 19 years later, Miranda as an adult, and she has been estranged from this island for 18 years, and we learn that she was banished because of the scandalous murder of her stepfather. And the person who was indicted for that murder was Joseph Vargas, who we much younger. So there's a lot of mystery in this one, which I love. And then to even add another layer, we have a narrator from 1930 who's this sort of orphan islander, and I'm not going to go into how that relates to the story, but that adds another layer.
Cool.
So there's a lot of intrigue here. It's when you were talking about how if you want like a little bit of suspense, a little bit of historical fiction, and how it sort of pleases everyone, I think this is another good choice for book club for that reason. It's sort of like, it has historical fiction, this beautiful setting, it has suspense, but it also has this sort of like juicy, fun aspect to it because it's like all these wealthy families. So yeah, this one is just one that I think it makes a great beach read because it has all those different elements, and it's just a real page turner.
I can't wait to read this one.
Right?
You just described it so well. I'm super excited.
Clearly, I'm excited about it.
That's a great book club pick.
Nice. I'm seeing some comments before.
Oh, good.
Good. Yeah.
That's great. Good to hear it. Okay. The next one I have is called The Way of Beauty by Camille Zamayo. Here's the cover. It's really nice.
That is pretty.
So you might know Camille. She wrote The Memory of Us, which was a recent World War II story.
Right.
So this book is also historical fiction, and I would describe it as all about choices and like the choices you make in life.
Okay.
So this actually takes place in turn-of-the-century New York, so a little bit different than World War II. And it follows this woman named Vera Keller, and she's the daughter of German immigrants. And the story starts when Vera's husband leaves her for another woman. And this new woman that her husband leaves her for is named Pearl. And what's interesting is Pearl's pretty cool. She's part of the suffragette movement.
Oh, right.
And her and Vera actually become friends.
Okay.
So a little bit of a kooky relationship there, but it's working for them so far. But what happens is Pearl really dedicates herself to the cause of giving women the right to vote, and she sort of begins to pull away from her husband, and I believe they have a son together. And so Vera is not being the best friend, and she sort of comes in and sees an opportunity to live the life she always wanted and sort of like go back, win her husband back.
Oh.
And so I'm not obviously going to spoil it, but this choice that she makes is going to affect her and her daughter Alice for years to come. And so we also get Alice's perspective in the future on how her mother's choice changed the trajectory of both of their lives.
Okay.
So it's a really nice mother-daughter story. It came out this week, so it's a good choice if you're looking for a May Mother's Day type book club.
Okay.
And like I said, it's about choices. If you're also like books set in New York City, this one's really interesting because they go into a lot about the architecture of New York.
Okay.
I think there's some around, there's a lot of explanation around how Penn Station was built. So,
interesting.
Yeah, so just a really interesting time period, and just a great discussion book if you're thinking about choices and what it means to be a mother and how that affects your children. So
it does sound timely for
Mother's Day. Yeah, here's the cover again if you want to see it.
Wave it around.
Yeah.
Okay, the final one that I'm recommending is The Daisy Children by Sophia Grant.
I love this cover too.
Yeah, this one is very pretty. I feel like everyone were like, this
cover
is beautiful, but they all are.
We choose books by their covers.
Yeah. So this one is a summer release. It's not out till August, but we wanted to put it on your radar because it's one that we're excited about.
Yeah.
So it's inspired by true events, which, again, I just sort of always love one that's grounded in some sort of fact. And I like it because we learn about a little-known aspect of history through sort of a family drama, which is always an intriguing lens to sort of learn more about history.
Definitely.
So we learn about Katie, who receives an inheritance from her grandmother, who she didn't really know. It sort of reminds me, we've been saying, the plot of the other book, this happens, and we're like, these people are so lucky. They get these inheritances.
I know. I love that. It's my favorite plot point.
Yeah, so she falls into this inheritance from her grandmother. Again, she doesn't really know her, but she knows she lives in Texas. Right. And Katie, at the time, she has a husband who she's estranged from, and she decides she's going to leave Boston and go to Texas and sort of claim her inheritance. While she's there, she meets Scarlett. Yes. She meets Scarlett, who's her cousin, who, again, she doesn't really know it either, and is sort of the opposite of her, and we see this fun dynamic between the two of them. And they're going through their grandmother's possessions, and they find all these photographs and all these letters, and they start uncovering hidden truths about their family that they didn't know.
Oh,
yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. So then we learn about Caroline, and we go back in time, and this is sort of what we're learning in these letters as well, whose child was killed in the New London explosion of 1937, which is basically this school explosion that happened in the 30s in Texas, and hundreds of children died, and it was basically this like horrific event. And what they called the Daisy Children were families who had children soon after that, and they was sort of like came into, not replacement, but sort of like came into these horrible situations in these families, but there was like hope of these new children. So anyways, we learn about Caroline, and we follow her storyline as she's in the 1930s and loses a child. And we get these two separate storylines as we're back in time, and then as Katie's learning more about her family, and then we see how they intertwine. So it's just a fun way to sort of watch the drama unfold. Again, I like how it's a family drama, but it definitely is rooted in history, and we get this historical drama as well. It's interesting to talk about whose story did you gravitate more towards, if either. I mean, I always think that that's an interesting discussion point for book clubs. And it has some nice, really unexpected turns, which is always fun too. So this is one, again, is a summer release, but I think would make a nice choice for book club.
Yeah, that's a really great recommendation. Thanks. Sounds like it has a lot of good elements. Heartbreaking.
It does, yeah.
Plot twist.
Yeah, I think it's a crowd pleaser.
Good stuff. Great. Well, those are all the books we have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't commented and let us know what book you're currently reading for book club, please do, because you have a chance to win one of our BookBub stickers. Upside down.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.